Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to the Youth Diversion Town Hall. My name is Eddie Hawkins, and I'm going to give everyone a few more minutes just to tune in. I know we are going live on YouTube and Facebook, so I do want to give everyone a moment or two just to see the notification and go ahead and pop in. But I do want to say we have a great discussion that is coming up with some great influential people. Um, so we're going to give everyone a few more minutes and then we are going to get started. Awesome. Have them rolling in. The internet is just acting a little slow for me. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, welcome to the It's Broken, Let's Fix It, the youth experience in Baltimore City panel discussion. My name is Eddie Hawkins, and I'm the Youth Activation Specialist of the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success and a staffer of the Youth Diversion Work Group. Today, we are convening to give youth a platform to talk about their experiences and their interactions with the youth justice system, in addition to giving our city and state leaders an opportunity to talk about the work that they are doing. In addition, to ensure that youth are diverted from the criminal justice system. Today, we'll be joined by individuals from the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success, Advocates for Children and Youth, the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice, to have a holistic conversation about these experiences and how we can work to make them better. But just to get us started, we have a transformational video from youth who have direct and indirect experiences with the criminal justice system here in Baltimore. We know that crime is plaguing our communities, and whether a youth has direct experience in the criminal justice system or whether it's their parent or a friend of theirs who has experience in the criminal justice system, they know what the issues are and they have ideas for those solutions. So we've brought them together and given them a platform to share what those ideas and those experiences have been. To kick us off, we'll be sharing that video, and after that video is played, we will be transitioning over to Tamika Govin, who is the Executive Director of the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success. I'm sorry, the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice. I'm getting tongue-tied, who will provide us with opening remarks. So Shauna, we are ready to see our youth experience video.
My name is Matthew Johnson. I'm 21 years old. I'm a West Baltimore native. I'm also a young Black father, and I'm also the leader of my organization, WAL Order. WAL stands for New Way of Life.
My name is Jada Johnson. I am 19 years old, and I think that it's really important for me to be here today because a lot of people have issues that they go through and they are scared to speak about them.
My name is Ayanna Thomas. I'm 20 years old. I'm a singer-songwriter based in Baltimore, and I spend a lot of my time helping out my community through service.
I'm Antonio Moore. I'm 21 years old. I'm from East Baltimore. I got a twin. Not a lot of people really know that. and I'm a big Ravens fan.
My name is Young Elder. I'm 18 years old, and I am a freshman at Coppin State University. I'm also a youth ambassador, a part of Healing Youth Alliance.
Of the 1,600 juvenile arrests in Baltimore City in 2018, most were for nonviolent and minor offenses, and 90% involved Black and Brown youth. This disparity is reflected in the lack of youth access to substantive out-of-school engagement, basic resources such as food and clothing, adult guidance, and employment opportunities, all extensions of systemic inequities, disinvestment, and bias. Meanwhile, we know that interventions by the juvenile justice system do more harm than good. Youth who are diverted from court are less likely to be rearrested and more likely to succeed.
No lies. No lies. Everything was true.
So many of those numbers was my friends in 2018. And all I can think about is the fact that it just made sense. Like, you gotta think about it. Like, in 2018, 1,600 kids locked up. But 3 years before, it was a $35 million jail built for youth in the city. So understanding that if anybody put $35 million anywhere, they're gonna make sure they get their return on investment. So if it's a kid's jail, you can't put pigeons in there. You're gonna have to put kids in there.
The city honestly has no remorse for our kids, especially our Black ones. My first initial reaction to hearing that most youth get into a lot of trouble just based off of resources that they lack access to, and just things that are not easy for them to get. I see it firsthand a lot. The city can just seem very evil, and it doesn't have to be, because it isn't to everybody. So it's not fair that some kids have to sit here and wonder, why them? Why aren't they worthy of a hot meal for dinner? You know, all brown children deserve the same amount of love and affection that kids who are more well off get.
When I go home, what am I going to eat? Who going to take care of my siblings while I'm out at school or wherever you are trying to make money? What jobs can I get? It's too many questions and too many things that a teenager or a child shouldn't have to be worried about at a certain age, and we are worried about it because we are the people caring for ourselves.
If I don't have a job, of course I'm going to steal. And if I don't have the resources that I need, of course I'm going to act out. You know, kids getting arrested for drugs. Why you think they doing drugs? You know, nobody's just like, I just want to do drugs just because. So it's like, we need to start at the core. Like, are these kids okay?
When it comes to school, I would definitely say that there should be more options for kids to pick a trade instead of just having to go through a bunch of stuff that they might never use in their life.
They're not teaching, you know, here's how you get a job.
If a child is going to have the responsibilities, then laws should be changed for that child to be able to get a job at a certain age. You know, certain things like unemployment should be available to teenagers who are in between 14 and 16 who can't have a job right now, but do want something better for themselves.
There's a lot of positive things going on. Like, it's 1,600 kids that got locked up in 2018. But in 2019 and 2020, you know, a lot of these kids was leading protests and telling people to vote and, you know, going door to door, handing out food when the pandemic hit. A lot of these kids is, you know, getting in rooms that kids wasn't even supposed to get into in the first place, and standing up to people in positions of leadership and really making their voices heard.
You know, as far as youth diversion, I mean, of course there should be an alternative solution to kids just being incarcerated. You know, prison itself is supposed to be somewhere where you get reformed, where you're rehabilitated. But it's crazy in there. There are a lot of things that happen in prison that will traumatize a young person. There should be another option.
Now we have the Executive Director of the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice, Tamika Govan, who will provide us with opening remarks.
Thank you, Eddie. Good afternoon, all. And I am honored to speak to you this afternoon about what the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice is, or how we're supporting youth justice reforms. I must say that video was very powerful. It is always more powerful to hear how policies and how the ways of doing things impact people, hear from those who are affected. And so I look forward I'm glad that this panel has been brought together. Again, I am Tamika Govan, and I serve the citizens of Baltimore as the Executive Director of the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice. And just to tell you a little bit of what our work does, it's seeking to address those issues that were discussed in the video. Our office is working diligently on implementing the recommendations of the youth diversion assessment that was published over a year ago and was mandated by the consent decree. And in that report, there was an outline of numerous recommendations that span the youth justice system from pre-arrest to reentry. And at this time, MOCJ is focusing on that point where 90% of youth of color in Maryland enter the youth justice system, and that is at arrest. I also want to mention something that I heard today at another meeting that I viewed, and that was that 2/3 of youth in Maryland are placed out of home for misdemeanors and for failure to appear. And that to me was shocking. But it also, these two pieces of information combined, and we heard many other data points in this video that underscores why this work is so important. And for MOCJ, knowing that entry point, police into the youth justice system, we are very excited about the work that we're doing with our partners to focus and reform that point of entry and make that not be a point of entry. So this is a big opportunity to divert youth early, to reduce interaction with police, and to reduce harm above all. The research shows that for youth to interact with the youth justice system is not doing them any better, is not doing them good, is not rehabilitating, is actually creating harm in the way of recidivism, in the way of lost education, in many numerous ways. And so we are very dedicated to this work. MOCJ also oversees the existing youth diversion program, and this program has been in existence for many years in the city. So there is one that exists, but we again see the opportunity to change our approach to a new approach where youth are no longer taken into custody and taken to the Baltimore City Juvenile Justice Center. Again, the act of arrest itself is harmful and could change how youth view themselves and the things that happen after that. And so that program is this, and we look to that to inform how we move forward with a new approach. I also would like to acknowledge and I'm encouraged by the work of our partners. And there's so much work going on. And it's been going on for a long time. And I feel like right now, this is a great moment because there's so many voices and so many efforts coming together. But for example, the Baltimore City Police Department has, the Baltimore Police Department, has launched the the public comment period for the youth interaction policy. And this is important because it provides and sets the basis for how youth are diverted, how we could decrease the interaction or reduce the interaction between police officer and youth, and creates that foundation for diverting youth to community-based organizations, to organizations that could address the issues that the youth in the video spoke about, the things like food and money and the family dynamics and hunger. So that provides the basis for which police could have some decision-making assistance in to divert youth to community-based organizations. Also, the work of the Juvenile Justice Reform Council in looking at providing or conducting listening sessions, and also, working to identify the priorities of youth justice in Maryland. This is all very exciting work, actual things happening that are leading the way to reform. And most of all, I'm encouraged by the activism in the voices of youth in Baltimore. We saw thousands of youth take to the streets in peaceful protest earlier this year after the homicide of George Floyd. And that makes me very confident that with the power of the youth in Baltimore, that we will see better outcomes and we will see a better system for youth and better approaches. So with that, I thank the panelists. I thank the youth that are being involved and bring their voices to the table. And I turn over the mic to Ashley Devon. I also apologize for leaving a bit early, but I thank you again, or I thank you for being a part of and joining us in this panel discussion. Thank you.
Ashley Devon, and I'm the Youth Justice Policy Director at Advocates for Children and Youth. I want to take a moment to introduce our panelists, and I also want to just thank Tamika Gavin so much for her opening statement. We're going to start with Senator Carter. We're going to give you a moment just to introduce yourself and discuss your work. If I could just maybe start, she's one of the pioneers that we have here in the state of Maryland doing incredible work in our Senate. And when we look at the reforms that have come down in most of the years, her name is behind them. She currently chairs the Police Accountability Committee, and she's a member of the Juvenile Justice Reform Council. And she represents the great constituency of Baltimore City. So I kind of gave you a lead in, but you do incredible work, and I wanted to just make sure we get an opportunity to celebrate the advocates that we have in Annapolis. So go ahead, Senator Carter.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the introduction. More importantly, thank you for allowing me to participate. I'm very excited to be invited. I'm very excited to hear from youth. I make a lot of decisions to govern the lives of youth and other people, but frankly, young people are a group that we hear from far too little when it comes to making decisions that govern your lives. So briefly, I just want to say that I was born and raised in Baltimore City, and I have been keenly aware in my entire adulthood that neither myself nor anyone else that I know that's an adult could or should be held fully accountable for the worst decisions that we made when we were children. And if we were, I wouldn't be a lawyer, I wouldn't be a senator, and I might not even be alive. And that goes the same for everyone. And so what's so important is that young people do what young people do. Young people aren't perfect. That's what the growing experience is. And so this concept that came along to criminalize the behavior of young people for being young, for making mistakes, that's where everything went awry. For many, many years, prior to even the current Juvenile Reform Council, I've been advocating to stop the automatic charging of youth as adults because I actually believe that youth are youth, children are children, and children are not adults. Thus, you can't go and decide, well, I don't like this particular behavior here, so in this instance, this person has to be treated as an adult, as a mature person, because it's not about the person's level of maturity. Their brain and their level of maturity and understanding the intentions of their consequences of their actions doesn't change just based on the nature of the offense. And so we're at a pretty exciting time because finally, I actually believe we're on the cusp of making change when it comes to juvenile justice and how we treat our young people. And some of those things I understand you already heard today, but I felt we had a very encouraging meeting this morning. By the end of this year, we're going to come out with these recommendations that will be transformed into legislation, which is laws. So they will become the new laws. And some of the things that we're discussing are the issues of, as you've already heard and mentioned, diversion. And in the juvenile system, they call it informal adjustment, I believe. Diversion for all misdemeanor offenses, diversion to keep people out of detention. We also discussed, and this is really exciting, the concept of closing the youth prisons across the state, where children are sent out of their communities, out of their neighborhoods, when they are put in placements, and doing more of a regional placement, both in detention and out of detention. I'm not using the right word. What is it? In commitment and out of commitment. So that, I mean, the whole idea is to identify an individual, not sweep all people up into one fell swoop of this category, to individualize the needs and the treatment of young people, give them the services that they need so that, you know, if they make mistakes, they can brush themselves off, learn from those mistakes, become more productive people. And frankly, it's in all of our interests because we have to depend on you, the young people, to hold it down in the future and hopefully do a better job than what my generation and God knows the generation before me did, even worse. So that's the juvenile justice issue. Briefly on police reform. So actually, I'm in the Senate. The Senate doesn't have a work group on policing, only the House does. But what the Senate did is we decided we didn't need a work group. We decided we didn't need to study this issue of police reform anymore. I mean, Lord knows in Baltimore City, we have the consent decree, we have the Department of Justice, we have all the evidence that we need police reform. I also want to stress that all of us know that live in Baltimore and some throughout Maryland that police abuse, excessive force, extrajudicial killing is not limited to George Floyd. It's not even limited to Freddie Gray. There are hundreds of people that have been killed by police in the state of Maryland over the last 20 years and many within this very decade. Many after Freddie Gray, which is just 5 years ago, 2015. And so we don't have to look to what's going on nationally to understand the great need to reform policing behavior here. And I want to just really say that we're on the cusp of making real significant changes to policing, what the laws that govern policing, it's revolutionary because I can tell you that lawmakers and policymakers have never been where they are before when it comes to making these decisions. We are looking at repealing the Law Enforcement Officer Bill of Rights. We're looking at imposing not only a duty to de-escalate prior to any use of force, but defining a use of force policy that defines force as a last resort, only to be used as a last resort. And if it is violated, there would be criminal penalties for so doing. That's kind of revolutionary. It's necessary, but it's a big change from where we've been.
I want to say thank you for you sitting at the state level and making sure that change is happening. I want to work in our other two panelists here.
Thank you.
Give an opportunity for Matthew Johnson. And I want to just acknowledge his full name is Matthew Johnson, but here for our conversation, he prefers to go by Maddie, and so that's what we're going to call him in this space. So we want to give you an opportunity to say hello and introduce yourself, and then we're going to go right into Summer, and we want to get into some of the content and ask some questions.
First of all, I would like to say thank you for having me and thank you for everybody who tuned in to watch. My name is Matthew Johnson. I'm a Baltimore City Youth Commissioner. I'm the head chair of the Access to Resources Committee, and I'm also the founder of my organization, Wall Order. Wall stands for New Way of Life.
Well, I wanted to go
I'm sorry,
right
I didn't
over
hear
to
you.
Miss Summer.
Good afternoon. Thank you for this wonderful opportunity. My name is Summer Nelson, and I'm an avid member of Baltimore City's My Law Teen Court program. I have a passion for reformation of the criminal justice system, and I hope to one day sit on the Supreme Court of Justice.
Summer, I want to stay with you. What does youth justice mean to you? And I want to kind of allow you to speak and allow Maddie and Senator Carter to go right after you.
What youth justice means to me is providing opportunities for all. Baltimore City, I know as a whole, can make a difference. I live in Baltimore City as a youth in Baltimore. I would like to see opportunity, I would like to see opportunity equally from all. When I think of youth justice, I honestly see kids in prisons and jails for what? When I see youth justice, it's more so learning and understanding and implementing education into these systems and reformation.
What does youth justice mean to you? Yes, Maddie.
I'm sorry. First of all, I would like to say, it feels, I'm sorry. I would like to say that we shouldn't even be talking about youth justice because everybody, like she just said, should have equal opportunities. So it shouldn't even be a such thing as youth justice. That's the number one thing I would like to say. But since we are speaking on youth justice, I feel as though youth justice, it means to provide for those who have been put in a situation provide for those who have been put in a situation that they haven't been asked to be put in, nor do they have a choice to be put in. That's what that means to me in this specific situation.
Very powerful answers. It's very interesting for me because when I came into the space, we didn't call it, when I grew up and up until maybe 2 or 3 years ago, overwhelmingly, it wasn't called youth justice. It was called juvenile justice. And using the term juvenile puts this negative stigma on young people that doesn't even assume that they are youth or that they're children that need to be cared for and that they need additional support in getting where they need to be. It's almost that we are assuming that they're baby adults and we should hold them to the exact same letter of the law that we do someone who is over the age of 26 and their brain has developed. Senator Carter, I want to come right to you. You've spoken about this many times on many platforms, but for this space, I really want to ask you, do you think delinquent behavior or criminality amongst young people is something that can be avoided or prevented? And just want to start with that first part of the question. I have a second part I want to follow up with.
In many instances, in most instances, it can. I mean, children generally are finding their way, and there's no behavior that children do that somewhere isn't some adult or group of adults responsible for it, whether it's good behavior or what we categorize as bad behavior. But I do think that tying that into your earlier question with youth justice would be holding the culprits that have created the conditions for our children accountable, like the lead paint companies that have never been held accountable for distributing poisonous paint throughout our city that still infects our children and causes permanent brain damage. Overwhelming majority of our children that find themselves in delinquent status or in the justice system are lead poisoned even to this day. Justice would be holding the policymakers that have created an apartheid budget for our Baltimore City school children and not found a way to have relevant curriculum match the needs of our children. That would be justice, holding them accountable. In what we do in our current system is we blame the victim. The children are the victims, and then we blame them for their behavior when it falls outside of the norm or expectation of what we have in society.
Moving around and clapping back there, I want to give you an opportunity to speak right to what Senator Carter was saying.
Like she said, holding the people who are in higher positions accountable for their actions. You have a lot of people who, not to speak on the hidden agendas that they have, but you have a lot of people who do things for specific reasons. And a lot of times I don't find enough talk about it. And what I mean by that is, for instance, with the youth, the squeegee kids, first of all, they shouldn't even be called squeegee kids. They're young men who are looking for opportunities to strive in this society that they have not asked to be in, but misfortunately have been put in those circumstances that they were in. There were no preventive, and I say it again, preventive strategies to prevent them from getting there. Instead of doing that, they attacked the situation. And like she was saying, I believe that that is something very strong that is not being not only talked about, but is not being applied. A preventive strategy to everything. I believe preventive should be before attacking the situation.
You, Maddie, for a second before we move over to Summer. So, based on what you're saying, you do believe that delinquent behavior and criminality amongst young people is something that can be avoided if we have prevention strategies. So, what are some prevention strategies you think should be implemented, or programs that you think should exist, or are there programs that you work with that you think that are things that can serve as prevention?
The same way that they provide Under Armour the support that they have to do whatever they want to do in Baltimore, or the Horseshoe Casino, the same way they can kick out funds to support the youth. And what I mean by that is you could have so many programs, influential programs. A lot of people aren't realistic with that either. They, most people start programs, but they aren't realistic with their target. But influential programs that grab these children while they're young and influence them the same way that the media does, or the the radios, and just like I said, social media, influence them to go down a direct path, or not a direct path, but a more blessed path than the one that they're going down to achieve the same goals. That's the key thing that I think is missing in a lot of the things that's taking place, is not showing them that they can acquire the same things that they desire, taking a different route.
To bring you in here, I want to give you an opportunity to respond to the question. Do you think that criminality or delinquent behavior amongst young people is something that can be avoided? And if you are agreeing with Senator Carter and with Maddie that it can be avoided, I want to take the conversation a step further and ask you, what type of strategies and programs do you think are needed to do so?
I absolutely think it can be avoided, especially at the roots. So, like Maddie said before, and I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, and I apologize if I'm not, like the squeegee kids, the media has painted them inside of a negative light. We could take that from the beginning and label them as entrepreneurs and implement them into programs where they can keep that entrepreneurial mindset and apply it to the real world to make a difference today. So when we take it from the root and we put positive information and educate these kids, then they can truly create an impact, because we can see this from the very beginning that they know what they're doing. They see that these are different opportunities that they can take advantage of. It's a matter of how they take advantage of it and what we can do to help them.
And really just kind of talk about how Baltimore City ended up in the consent decree. So we know that in April of 2017, the City of Baltimore and the Department of Justice entered into a consent decree, which is a court enforceable agreement to resolve findings that is believed that the Baltimore City Police Department, which we call BPD, engaged in a pattern and practice of conduct that violates the First, Fourth, and Fifth Amendments of the U.S. Constitution and certain provisions of federal statutory law. 2 years later, the Center of Children's Law and Policy, and we'll commonly use the term CCLP as an acronym, and that's the Center for Children's Law and Policy, released a report recommending the efforts to decrease juvenile justice and criminal justice involvement. The CCLP report recommended we consider creative solutions to low-level law-abiding behavior that would show the city as being responsible to community concerns without resorting to punitive measures or more dangerous law enforcement tactics. What are some creative solutions that you have seen in other states that you would like to see here in Maryland, Senator Carter? Or it doesn't even have to be Maryland. Because I think that made it too broad, right? What are just some creative things that you would like to see implemented in Baltimore that can assist with deterring low-level crime? As it pertains to what the findings in that CCLP report?
Well, the first thing I'd like to see the Baltimore Police Department get their heads right, because we're under a consent decree, but I still practice law, and I'm here to tell you that there has not been a sweeping change in behavior when it comes to police-citizen interaction, particularly with our youth. I see every day a lot of the same behavior that I saw pre-consent decree exercised today, including with young people. But I mean, I'm a big proponent.
I'm going to ask a deeper question. What do you think it will take for us to be able to change that behavior?
Sincerity on the part of our leaders, those that govern the laws that govern the police department, as well as the mayor who chooses the leader and the direction of policing in our city. Sincerity on the part of those leaders to no longer have a desire to place policing and police members above the people. A glaring example is that the non-requirement that police live in the community, know the community, or walk the streets. It's not required, and they don't. Most part, our police still force, 3 years after the consent decree, they still don't live in the city for the most part, especially the command staff and the leaders. But really quickly, I would say citation in lieu of arrest, which means a civil citation, no matter the offense. For example, we have, every time that, because we have a terrible problem in our city with violence, and we have a terrible homicide, a high homicide rate, every time anyone hears gun, there's this knee-jerk reaction of, my God, let's get rid of the guns, the guns, the guns. But so many young people in particular are swept up because they're in proximity to a gun, or they just have it for protection, because if they don't, they know that they're going to get in trouble. They're going to have a problem. They're going to get messed with if they don't have protection. But the mere possession of that gun is a criminal act, and it's treated as like the worst offense. Like everybody walking around with a gun or close to a gun is a violent criminal out to just destroy the world. That's how it's very much viewed in the legal community and in the justice system. So I think that we need to do an assessment of individual cases, charges, and youth, and stop, basing how we treat young people on the trumped up charge. And I say trumped up charge because in many jurisdictions, police officers themselves determine the charges. In Baltimore City, prosecutors actually determine the charges, but in some smaller jurisdictions, the police officer makes the arrest and determines the charges. That's so important because they have the power to charge, for example, a first-degree assault, which is going to cause a young person to automatically be charged as an adult, as opposed to a second-degree assault. And it happens all the time. So we need to take some of that discretion away from law enforcement and make it mandatory that we do citation in lieu of arrest. And that's a big start to one of the changes that needs to be made.
Thank you so much for that answer. So we know that one of the solutions that we want to see is a citation in lieu of arrest. I want to go to Summer. What are some of the solutions or creative things that you would like to see done here in Baltimore City to decrease the amount of low-level crime that happens, or amount of low-level young people who enter into the system?
As I mentioned before, I'm a member of Baltimore City's Teen Corps program. And honestly, a consistent thing that I see is that kids are not given the necessary resources and opportunities to, participate in after school. They have all of this free time and they have nothing to do with it. So when we implement children into different systems and opportunities that they may take an interest into, we are giving them an opportunity to not only look into their future, but taking away some of that free time where they may get into these dangerous situations. So therefore, that's what I believe.
Question here: what does that look like? What does filling up free time of young people look like? I want to just kind of push you just and ask. I'm an advocate, and I have the privilege of being able to go into spaces and work with wonderful legislators like Senator Carter. But I have an opportunity to advocate. And if you're saying that's what you want, what does that look like to you?
Okay, so when I think of various after-school opportunities, and I understand with COVID-19 being a big block for many opportunities for children, I enjoy reading. That's one of my favorite opportunities. So I like book clubs, but I understand that there are athletic kids, those who enjoy athletics. So after-school athletic programs, of course, following the proper guidelines once more with COVID-19. And not only that, but I enjoy discussions and immersing myself in politics and understanding what is happening in the real world and how I can make a difference and what I can do to make change. So These interactive programs are just merely having a chance to interact with not only adults, but have discussions on how to make the world a better place. What are we going to do to make the change? Because after all, we are the future. So what are we going to do? What is the plan? So I would like programs that help immerse us into not only politics and government, but opportunities for the future.
Thank you so much, Summer. That was a really powerful answer. Maddie, I want to get you involved here. What are some creative things that you would like that you think could assist in this area?
So one thing I want to say, both of what they said goes hand in hand, and I want to speak more on what the senator said, dealing with the gun laws and everything. I feel as though, well, of course we might not say it because of the system that's set up against us, but I feel as though we should have a different teaching as to the focus towards a black male owning a gun and doing it the proper way. I feel as though, like she said, if we had certain programs to teach these young men to be entrepreneurs or to focus on different things, one of the things that a benefit you get out of being an entrepreneur is your gun license, and you're able to carry a gun license if you have a business where you carry a large amount of money with you. So like she said, with the programs, that ties in the programs and the teaching, and like I said earlier, with the influence, which is a gun, and teaching a young male or the youth how to the proper way to obtain a gun and carry it. And like I said, give them the knowledge on everything they need to know, instead of, like she said, making them out to be the most violent person or, horrible person in the world just because they have a gun. When we know for a fact that there's another set of people out there who train their kids since they're babies to be prepared to defend themselves as you should as a human being and as a man.
Those are points. I will say that this is the area of the work that I'm probably the most passionate about as someone who's a former educator. My focus is how do we keep kids out of the system holistically. And it's really interesting. I'm going to go back to Summer's comment for a little bit. We hear the term all the time. We need programs. We need programs. We need programs. And I think the largest misconception in Baltimore, right, after that is that we don't have programs, and or how do we then meet the need? And so I'm glad that you lifted up the Teen Court program that you participate in, Summer, and I think that is a phenomenal program. I want to just put some data up and just really talk about the fact that we have almost 120,000 kids under the age of 18 in Baltimore City. And when we look at the 10 cities who are of the most similar demographics and size, we see on average Baltimore City has roughly 40,000 more young people than those cities. However, our investment in positive youth engagement, economic opportunities, or tiered interventions is not the same as cities with a smaller population than Baltimore City. And if there was one area that I would like to see, in addition to the area that Senator Carter put forth and that Summer put forth and that Maddie put forth, is that I would like to see a continuum of services, that anytime we observe a young person who could be deemed as at risk or engaging in or at risk for being to engage in criminality, I think that they should be immediately matched and paired with the program. I think that we need to look at, yes, our athletic programs. However, we just need to look at what are our programs that have positive youth engagement and positive youth engagement opportunities. To if I have committed some sort of crime or I have observed behavior that may be criminal, I want to, let's give me the UMBC choice or gap. If I have actually committed a crime and I'm working to rebuild myself, but I was able to enter into a diversion program or get informally adjusted, well, let's make sure that we get those kids over to ROCA. Every young person should be directly connected to a program, or that there should be a program in every young person's community that is able to invest in them positively developing into a young person. And so that is something that a continuum of services, and that was something that we saw in 2012 done in the state of Washington around what diversion programs look like, and I would love to see that here in Baltimore City. So we're all going into the final question. Programs may not be viewed by you as impactful, so they will feel like they do not need to continue to engage. They need to continue to engage in delinquent behaviors. Do you think harsh punishment like incarceration is more or less effective than the restorative practice approach like teen court, mandatory community service, or mentorship? And since we have a teen court representative in Ms. Summer, I want to go directly to you. I want to know, do you think harsh punishment like incarceration is a adequate deterrence, Or do you think that it is more or less effective than restorative practice approach like teen court, mandatory community service, or mentorship?
I agree. I do not believe that harsh punishment is ever the choice, especially when we're dealing with children who are growing and developing and learning about the world out there today. So I believe, like programs like you mentioned before, My Law and Teen Court, that we are immersing them in opportunities that will allow for them to, as it's really important to me that making a change, making a difference, and understanding that we are the future, we are these generations that will be changing and making laws of the future. So in understanding that opportunities and programs that immerse us in things that we take an interest in, and rather than punishments that they're not necessarily showing or proving that are making a change in criminal justice today. So I'm sorry, I'm a little nervous at the moment. I believe that opportunities provided by My Law and Teen Court have proven and shown, I've seen kids come back from various cases and take interest in it, that they would like to make a change in this world and make a difference.
Thank you so much. We know that that was a big question, so thank you so much for answering it so well. Senator Carter, as a practicing attorney and someone who has worked in, both parts of the legislative body at the state level, what do you think? Do you think that this punitive crime approach is what will change things? And it's really interesting. I want to set it up by saying the current Senate president started off last session by saying, in times when we were afraid and didn't know what to do, we answered with punitive punishment. So as someone who's there and in those spaces and having those conversations and really is a champion on that level, what do you think the answer needs to be?
Thank you. And I just want to elaborate on the prior answer, which I completely agree with. More than what I think, it's about what the data shows. It's what research shows. Research shows that when children get the services that they need, when they get wraparound services, when the system that we have, the juvenile justice system that we have in place now functions at its best and provides those services, children do better. There's much less recidivism, and they grow out of the behavior that got them there in the first place. Alternatively, on the contrary, basically, when children are imprisoned, when they are taken away from their families and their communities and isolated, when they are taken away from all that is familiar to them, they tend to do worse. In addition to that, when they are put into these prisons and treated as criminals, there is much more of an inclination to recidivate, and that's what data shows. That's not coming from me. And so the goal should be to provide the services to all children as they need it on an individual basis, and not to massively imprison and incarcerate our children to keep them, in holding cells until they are in adult cells. That's the wrong way to go.
Came up. And I think that everybody in the advocacy community grasped for a second at the previous Juvenile Justice Reform Council. And one of the members of the Office of Public Defender was posed a question that essentially said, has there ever been a time in which you saw which direction it was going for a kid and you thought that, this kid would be better served by being incarcerated? And the response was, that's not the purpose of our juvenile justice system. What do you say to those people who don't understand the purpose of the system and or what young people need? What do you say in those spaces? Or how do you address kind of those comments that come on a consistent basis, that sometimes a kid would just be better served as being locked up in a cage instead of following the research that you laid out?
So I'm well aware, based on being in the legislature for a long time, that there are many people who don't really care at all about what is best for the youth. They don't care about what's best for the young person at all. So sometimes that conversation is lost on them, as they do not care what's in the best interest of the children. But what they do care about is society and public safety. And the truth is that Maryland has no death penalty, so everybody that ever goes in is going to come out. and it's in society's best interest that we make sure that we rehabilitate, habilitate, educate, and prepare people to be good citizens, productive citizens, and that can contribute to society, to the tax base, and to the voting base when they come out. And it's not in society's interest that we do nothing but hold people in prison, give them no services they need, so they come out much worse off with no options except to engage in more criminality, because they're worse off when they come out than they were when they go in. And so that's the answer. For those that care about the best interest of the child, we know that these services work, and treating youth to the services they need works. But those who don't care, we care about public safety. We don't need to just have people growing more angry and less responsive and less productive while they're being held, and then release them to the street to have no other alternatives except criminality.
Thank you, Senator Carter. Maddie, I want to get you in here. What do you think about this topic? Do you think that incarceration is a deterrent, or do you think that it is more or less effective than restorative practice approaches like teen court or mandatory community service or mentorship?
So one thing I would like to speak on is being realistic about the situation. And when I say that, some people called me crazy because I'm going to speak on something that I normally don't speak on. I said that I wanted to get my own jail. And the reason that I say that is because if we do the proper things and provide the proper resources to rehabilitate people and actually prepare them to go back and out into society, like the whole 9 yards, that would be the proper thing as to or the proper example as to what a jail or a prison should be. It wouldn't be what we have today, which is, inhumane. That's how I feel about that, realistically. And then, like she said, if you're going to keep people locked up or decide to lock these people up or do what you're going to do with them, how can you set them up to come back in society worse? It's like, I'm not saying this is what I think, but it's like, what's the point of letting them out if you're setting them up to come right back into the same thing? It makes no sense. And then even if, like we were talking on our hidden agendas, even if you have a hidden agenda and this group of people are here and you still have these people failing and still here, you cannot all move up as a whole. So I don't understand the purpose of why they do that, but that's how I feel on that.
Thank you. So we're going to go into a moment of final thoughts. And so Maddie, we're going to stick with you. What are your final thoughts? If there's anything that you wanted the decision makers and powers to be, we have an incredible opportunity in Baltimore City. We have new individuals in almost every position of city leadership. We're going into a new person coming into mayor. We have Ms. Tamika, who's at the mayor's office of criminal justice. While she's not brand new, she is new-ish in that role. We have the mayor's office of children and family success. And, this office has only been around for a year. There are a lot of things and a lot of synergy that is currently happening around youth justice and the outcomes of young people. If you had to talk to the decision makers and give them your final thoughts on youth diversion and keeping young people out, or what would you say?
Like I said, I'm going to say it again. You got to be realistic when you're talking about the people who are subject or victims of being targeted systematically and strategically. You have to be realistic. It's a lot of things that people say you can't do because this is not their role or their job or their duty. But people pay taxes to be taken care of, and that's the reason why people work hard every year away from their families and pay taxes so that they can be taken care of. So the people who are in position that are being paid from taxes and hard-working money, you have to be realistic dealing with the people who are faced by these strategical, oppressed situations that they're in. That's all I have to say.
Maddie. Ms. Summer, I want to give you an opportunity to give us your final thoughts. You are a representative of the Teen Court program. You are a Baltimore City young person. If you had to talk to your leaders and to say what you want to see in your city and how you want to decrease the amount of young people in the system, or just if you had an opportunity to tell the folks who are coming into office and have to make these decisions what you would like to see and what will help for your age group and your population, what would you say?
Well, I'd like to start off with what Maddie said before. We put these people into these jails and expect for them to come out and immerse themselves back into the real world. But there's always a stigma behind it with, oh, well, you've been in jail. I don't want to hire you. And it's difficult. And then the system repeats itself where they're putting themselves back into these, where they're going to have to put themselves back into these positions just to survive, just to live. So once more, like I'm saying again, with implementing systems and education and opportunities to allow not only our youth, but people in general to rehabilitate and take this time as a learning process to understand what happened and what they can do to make a change in the world today. And what I would like to say to our leaders is listen to our youth. We have things to say. And what I have to say is that we want to make a difference. We want to have discussions with you about what we can do about making changes in the near future. And creating these programs and understanding what we have to say is one of those main steps towards doing that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Senator Carter, I want to go to you for the final word. You lifted up some very concrete things that we can do to begin to change the landscape of youth justice in Baltimore City and at the state level. And we know that you are in all the spaces saying all the things, but we know that Senator Carter can't do it alone. And if you had an opportunity to speak to the young people and to speak to city leadership and even your colleagues, what is your vision of youth justice reform for Maryland, and what is it that you need from your colleagues in leadership?
Thanks, Ashley. First, I want to say it's a pleasure being on the panel with you, Summer, and you, Maddie. I can't really do too much more than what you've already posited, but what I think is important, and you both touched on it, and Ashley, you know this has happened, when we overrode the governor's veto the first day of session or beginning of session last year on ban the box, which is a step in the direction of forcing private employers to hire people that have criminal records. If I were the leader of the city of Baltimore, I would make it clear that if you want to do business in my city, you have to do business with all the people, and you cannot discriminate based on a criminal record. That's what I would do if I were the leader of the city. And that's what I would suggest to the leaders of the city. What I think is critically important is what I started off with. We have very much a blame the victim mentality, but it's actually our responsibility to provide the opportunity and the options to the young people to make sure that we have a future, because without them, we don't have anything. And briefly, I'm going to just say that, when I first ran for office, I was younger, and I wanted to talk to a lot of young people that were voting age. And the people that were around my campaign advising me told me not to waste my time talking to anyone that did not have gray hair, because young people simply are not going to vote. No matter how much they like you, no matter how much they say they're going to ride with you, they are not going to vote. Now that is changing. That is changing slowly, but it is not changing enough. And what's so important is these kinds of conversations so that young people can understand the nexus between engaging in the political process, selecting who actually gets to represent you, who gets to make the laws, who gets to shape the policies, and then holding those people accountable to you. If young people check out, and those people that are stakeholders and interested in the best interest of young people check out, then that's why we have what we have, a political system that does not see you. And that is how we got where we are. And so the biggest advice I have is to stay involved. Understand, call your council people, call your state delegates, call your senators. If you aren't of age to vote, then you make sure everybody around you is voting. And I know it can sound trite, but trust me, we all know who votes, and who votes, that's who gets the responses. And that's real.
Powerful comments. And I just want to stop here and say that we are coming to the end of October, and October was Youth Justice Month of Action, which is a national month that celebrates activation around youth justice reform. The theme of this year is Vote Youth Justice. And when we say Vote Youth Justice, we are lifting up the comments that Senator Carter has said, and we are also lifting up and affirming the comments that Maddie and Summer have said, what they expect their legislators to do in office. I want to thank you all so much for being participants on this panel. I want to thank the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice for being a partner in this work. And I want to thank the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success and acknowledge the Director, Tisha Edwards, and Eddie Hawkins, who have supported this work group and doing this work. We have a lot to do, and I want to say thank you all so much for being a part of this.